Hi, everybody. This is Bob Ost, and this is Theater Resources Unlimited. It's our Friday community gathering, which we've been doing since April 17th, trying to provide a place to come together so that people can feel less isolated. And also, it's a place where we can also talk about issues that we're all going through and all experiencing during the shutdown, which is not just a physical shutdown for our lives, but it's also a shutdown for many of us artistically. And we're going to talk today about why it doesn't have to be a shutdown artistically. There are things that we can do, and there are ways we can use this time that we have in isolation to prepare for better days that are coming. We do have a vaccine. That's the good news. The bad news is there was no plan for distributing it, so it's like, okay, we got a vaccine. That's nice, but hopefully the new administration will be effective in finding a way to quickly distribute the vaccine and eventually lead us to a place of herd immunity. Actually, I hate that phrase. It just sounds so demeaning, but herd immunity, so that we don't have to be afraid of each other and we can come out bravely and go to the live theater and sit together. That will happen someday. I swear it. So today we're going to talk about what we're doing now. What we're doing in the meantime. And I just want to start off by having each of my panelists introduce themselves briefly, like just a minute or two, and talk about what you're up to in general, and then we'll get into more specifics. So Jane, ladies first.
Who are you calling a lady?
I know. As soon as I said it, I bit my tongue.
Hi, I'm Jane Dubin. I'm a commercial producer, most recently on Broadway with the Prom. And I'm also the chair of the board of Houses on the Moon Theater Company, and delighted that Jeremy is also a colleague on that board. And I'm also the co-teacher of the True Producer and Development Mentorship Program's Masterclass, now taking submissions. And now we'll be starting our interviews on Monday. So if you have an interest, get your applications in. That's about it.
And I would like to just to piggyback on that. If you have any questions about the program, you can email me. If you find Jane's email may also be in the chat, so you can also email her. But email me. I'm the person that actually has the masterclass application. You have to ask me for it. I'm happy to send it to you. Just shoot me an email. Next up, R.K. Greene, who I actually want to thank publicly once again for being the sponsor of our True Play Reading series. He did it last year and he's doing it again this year. So remember how I asked you for submissions for of your plays for our series? RK is the person you can thank for us having a series. So thank you, RK.
And all those expenses will be paid for, and exposure to a lot of true people and beyond. So I actually have produced, I think, 10 of the True Voices reading series, including one musical over the years. And so I think it's a really valuable thing, both to understand and participate in the submission process, but also then if you're accepted to do it, because it's a good thing. So my company is the Storyline Project, and it is a producer of new musicals and of plays, Broadway, Off Broadway, and on tour. Lately, we were involved in Peter and the Starcatcher and Farinelli and the King, A Time to Kill. So those are some
Oh, somebody just interrupted.
That's all right.
I got him, Bob. It's fine.
Okay. Go back.
Thanks,
back to you, RK.
We're currently working on a brand new musical called Beau, and we're off to a running start until the pandemic hit, and so we've been working on other ways to develop it and get it out to theater goers. In the meantime, I did a project called The Political Idol, which was done completely online, and so can talk about that experience as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, RK. And let's move to the previously unannounced special guest, surprise guest, Jeremy Handleman.
Thank you, Bob. You know, I was traveling incognito, so it's nice to appear now. Jeremy Handleman, my company's name is Off the Leash Productions. For the past 20 years, that was starting 20 years ago, that revolved around video production, which I continue to do. About a dozen years or so ago, I started to produce theater when I put my own play up, and it was through True that I found my director and my theater for that very first production. And True has been instrumental in my producing career, including the Off Broadway show formerly called Fucking Up Everything, which found me through True, or I found through True, however you want to phrase it. Commercial producer. In addition to that, I've been on a couple of Broadway shows, including On the Town, the revival a few years back, and a couple of years ago, John Leguizamo's Latin History for Morons. I'm a co-pro on a couple of other Broadway-aimed musicals, one of which that we thought might have been on stage this past year, but we all know what that story is about. And I'm also the lead producer of a immersive theater project that we also thought was going to come to life this past year, but that continues to be in development, as they say. During the pandemic, I made a conscious decision fairly early on in it to make a pivot towards live stream production. I've been very fortunate that it has worked out as well as it has, primarily on a work for hire basis. So I have been either the producer / director and or the tech director and or the video designer / editor for a fairly wide range of projects and organizations, both in and outside of theater. So
you've already jumped in on the pivot, which is something I was going to specifically ask. Now we've had this conversation many times with many people, but I think it's always important. Okay,
Before
Jean,
you get to the pivot, I just wanted to, something occurred to me this afternoon when you told me Jeremy was joining us, is that Jeremy, RK, and I met as part of the True Mentorship Program 3 years ago, when it was only one program. I just thought that was worth noting.
It is actually. It's a point of pride for me. So I appreciate that.
Look at us now, huh?
And look at us now.
yeah, and RK, you didn't lie. You actually did get dressed up for this. And as I said, I've been wearing this sweatshirt for months, so I couldn't change.
Well, hopefully you've taken it to the cleaners or put it in the washing machine.
It does get washed.
And I spent 10 minutes deciding which shirt to wear. So here we are in red. So Jeremy, you actually jumped into the pivot. And first I want to ask you, you said you did it relatively quickly. We went into shutdown on March 12th. Officially it was March 15th, but it was really March 12th when Broadway closed. How long did it take you to figure out what you wanted to do, and how did you figure out the direction to go?
Okay, so I guess the starting point for it was actually another organization I was very active in.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Somebody is asking how to apply for RK Greene's play reading series. It's the True play reading series. You apply through True.
Yeah, but
there's an email is trueplaysubmissions, truplaysubmissions@gmail.com. But we can talk about that later.
But I think if RK sponsors it one more year, he should have his name on it.
Of course.
The RK Greene Memorial reading series.
No, we don't want that. We don't want that.
So for me, I mean, in some way it began as somewhat, you can't even say that was accidental. I was the co-president of my college alumni club up until June of last year. It was a 2-year term. And it's a very active club. We do, I don't know, we probably do normally about 30 in-person events over the course of the year that are quite popular. And it became apparent very early on in the pandemic that wasn't going to be happening for a while. And so my initial step was really to pivot them to doing Zoom webinars, with a variety of, on a variety of subject and topics. And, and so I was running most of those webinars and, sort of developing the skill set of how to best use Zoom webinar. And look, Zoom is great for what it is, whether it's a meeting like this or webinars. And, we're all grateful that it's existed and has been so helpful in this past crazy year. But I also felt frustrated that, there has to be more interesting ways of presenting things than that. And so initially I just started researching on my own, exploring, playing around with some of the different platforms that were out there. Some of them have been around for a while. Some of them were fairly new. And then through one of the connections at the Brown Club, they were on the board of a theater company that was trying to figure out what they were going to do instead of their normal annual gala, that being the Working Theater. And I actually do know the person who founded and ran it. He's also a fellow Brown alum and also went to the same high school I did, though he's younger than I am. And so that was really the first event that I was hired to do. And I think that event, I started working on it probably back in, I don't know if it was April, it was certainly by May.
Okay, so that was actually the key question for me. I wanted to know how quickly that transition went.
So it was,
I moved true virtually on April 17th, and I thought I was like way behind everybody else.
I was doing the Brown Club stuff, before that, but that was early on. But what I wanted to do was start to create stuff that had, more production value to it, that could do more than just, then it was more than just a bunch of squares and stuff. So,
Right.
Part of it was learning by doing, but I did that event using StreamYard, and I've used StreamYard for quite a few of the events that I've been doing ever since then. And, basically after that event, one thing led to another. Someone saw that event and they wanted to hire me for another event.
So let's weave more of this into the other conversation. I wanted to have everybody speak a little bit, and then we'll come back and go into more of the details. RK, what was your process? What happened to you when Broadway closed on March 12th, and where were you with your productions?
Well, we had had an out-of-town tryout. We had Joe's Pub and a Sony album release for Beau the musical, and we had several theaters because we were gearing toward an off-Broadway production in New York, ready to go. And slowly they weren't available. And as the pandemic kind of took hold, they had to cancel everything. And so we found that, in fact, all the regional theaters in our strategic way to get this brand new musical by unknown writers to New York was to do it through a regional activity or off Broadway. And we found that through the pandemic, all the theaters were then closed, but they were all working on their own projects. And so, their pipeline was filled, and they're filled for 2 years in some instances, because they've used this time to be able to develop new musicals and plays all throughout the country. So, we toyed with, putting everything on a back of a truck, on a trailer, and touring, in, outdoor movie theaters, and try to find out where we might be able to kind of keep our cast and everybody going during this time. But we're now thinking that we're going to make a full film. We're in negotiation with the agents now to get this done. And if, knock on wood, spring or early summer, we'll be in production. And then we will distribute this product through the regional theaters. And there are about 100 or so that are lined up already to be part of this subscription series as a product that the regional theaters and amateur on up to the main regional theaters would be able to offer to their subscribers without putting money up. Because one of the things that has happened during this pandemic is all the regional theaters have spent their money just keeping doors open, even though they had to lay off people, et cetera, like that. They really need to then recapitalize to get their shows back on boards. And that's not going to happen until you know,
2022.
very late fall or 2022.
Yeah, they're predicting late fall, but I don't think we're going to talk about this. Is going to be another topic we're going to touch on, which is basically the feasibility of actually running commercial shows at 50% capacity and things like that. You know, I'm just not sure.
Yeah. Anyway, so what we'll do, just to finish that off, what we'll do is we'll use this film as our regional tryouts and build its reputation, and then see if we can bring it to New York.
It raises an interesting question. In a pre-Broadway tryout, you have the option of rewriting and restaging things and finding new ways of doing it. What do you do with a piece that you've recorded, you've filmed for virtual presentation, and you suddenly start seeing flaws and you want to change things?
I mean, on the recording thing?
Yeah, the recording. Did I misunderstand? You said that you're going to be using the recording as a version of your pre-Broadway tryout.
Yeah, it's going to be an actual filmed production.
Right.
We're going to go into a studio, and we're going to, 4 to 6 weeks. We're going to be in that studio in a bubble to be able to produce this.
Okay, I understand.
So
I'm nitpicking because you would refer to it as like pre-Broadway tryout, which is usually developmental. So yeah. It's not really developed. It's really not developmental. It's the production.
Yeah, and we've actually used Zoom and things like that to further develop the actual script and make changes to it during this pandemic era, and that's been quite useful because our cast is all over the world.
Okay, so remember the title of this today's topic is the limitations, possibilities, and best uses of virtual presentation. So we're actually crisscrossing over different things. We're talking about limitations. And you just talked about possibilities, and Jeremy has really focused on best uses. So that's my phone. I hate this. That's like, what can I do?
Well, Jane can bring it all together,
Thanks. Okay. And it's just a spam phone call. So I want to move to Jane again. We're talking about the limitations, possibilities, and best uses of this time during using the virtual medium. Let's go to you and talk to you though about the same thing that Jeremy and Arkia basically said, which is the pivot. What was your process, and what was? I know that you've said it in other meetings, but putting it in context of this meeting.
Sure. I have two different. Well, first of all, class obviously went completely virtual and shortened, and we went every 2 weeks instead of monthly. And I think people in the class. It was a boot camp for 3 months instead of stretched out over 9 or 10 months, and they're recovering now. But for the producing side, I have both the nonprofit theater company with Houses on the Moon and a commercial project, and I'll start with Houses on the Moon because there were a lot of things that had to get done. In the beginning, it was how do we deal with all of the different legislation that was going on and try to figure out how to survive in terms of getting PPP loans and EIDL loans and all that. But then it quickly became, how do we continue to do what we do, which is we tell stories. And we started, it's great when you have a theater company behind you and you say, I have an idea, and then they run with it. I had an idea, which was, not an original idea, but, let's do a podcast and a way to archive some of our previous work, get conversations with our artists and with our community partners, and also help to get artists paid, which is also an important part of all the things that go on. I'm happy to say that podcast is launching in March. We have 3 episodes done. We have 2 more in the hopper, and we'll have 8 by the time the spring is finished. And then also to look at what, like everybody else, we had a big presentation plan for March, which obviously didn't happen, to pivot to having presentations that were very focused. So our first was using Zoom and doing a play reading, just very private play reading. We figured that that really wasn't a great platform. Switched to StreamYard. I'm sure Jeremy had some influence on that decision. And started doing, we wound up doing in total 6 different presentations, all about 50 to 60 minutes. That seemed to be the optimal or maximum length of time that people could pay attention. And we used them as also as fundraising opportunities. Everything was free, but you know, if you'd like to help support us. And we did the same thing with our gala, but all of it, like RK said, in terms of having video and audio of performance, we can use it for licensing, for booking, et cetera, et cetera. So it actually became something that was done because we plan to continue to do it. The podcast, for example, is something that we will do beyond this, because it's really a great format for what we do. On the commercial side, I had been working with a small musical. Again, we had a lot of momentum. We had been a Kansas City rep for their Monday night series. We were there for a week, lots of work done, followed that up with 2 weeks at good speed as part of the Johnny Mercer Writers Workshop, and again, ready to come in and do something. And again, they're pivoted to, because we were not on anyone's schedule for the spring or for the fall, and as time goes on, knowing now that, you know, we're out, you know, a couple of years, even for a developmental production, we pivoted also to recording a radio play. Now it's a musical, so it's a lot more complicated than it is for a play, but we found the process of doing audio play is not just the process of recording your script. It's an adaptation the same way that a play is an adaptation of a movie. You have to rewrite for stage. An audio play is an adaptation of your stage play because you have no visuals to rely on. And
also the concept of the soundscape that comes
I
into
was
a podcast,
I was just about to say, for folks, you know, like when you're voting for Tony Awards, nobody can vote in that category except people in the sound field, because nobody thinks that producers know what soundscape means. Well, just start doing a podcast of a musical and you'll learn how to determine what a soundscape is, because it's so integral. So we've been, you know, it took a while. Everybody's got their lives, and we have our team is all over the place, but easy to gather on Zoom. We have the first 40 minutes recorded, all soundscaped, all sound designed and everything. And, you know, we have someone interested in taking us the rest of the way. So that's where we are.
I'm lost.
And Bobby, I think you have to mute.
I just muted her. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So essentially, to go back to to structure this a little bit, I wanted to talk today about the possibilities, limitations, and best uses. Jeremy, I think, is really the guy to talk about best uses, but also the possibilities of it, because you seem to have done the most varied work. You've actually embraced the virtual medium completely, heart and soul here. In fact, you're working constantly, it seems. How many projects have you managed to do, really?
I mean, keeping in mind, I mean, some of these projects, you know, they're really like, you know, like a 6-week timeline from beginning to end. So, you know, and I try not to, I mean, there's a little bit of overlap between projects, but I try not to go too crazy with it. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, I mentioned the Working Theater. I did the Mahawi Performing Arts Center up in the Berkshires.
Which I saw that, yeah.
Gala, which was a huge star-studded bunch of participants. I did.
And to go back to something that you said, because I really want to bring it out. And you talked about wanting to find ways of using the virtual medium without it just being what I call talking heads and frames. It's
Right.
You're trying to go beyond talking heads and frames. It's just what my whole goal was with the True Benefit that we're doing now. So talk a little bit about some of the techniques that you've worked with.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a variety of things. I started to mention before, I've used StreamYard for a fair number of these events that I've been doing. It's, for those that don't know it, StreamYard is probably best described as being a simplified version of a television control room for for like a studio broadcast sort of thing. It's pretty easy to use if you're reasonably, you don't have to be like a tech ace, but if you're comfortable around tech, StreamYard's pretty easy to use. It's browser based. Everything happens in the browser. Guests are invited through a link just like they are with Zoom. I've also used Open Broadcast Studio, which is a more complex software, which is free. It's open source.
That's what we're using for the benefit.
Right, but but there is a learning curve with that, and the only way there's a zillion tutorials out there for all of these things, but ultimately you have to start working with it and doing it, and you start to learn, and frankly you start to like when I did like the first few events with StreamYard, you would start to realize, oh, okay, well, if I'm going from one video to another video, there are certain limitations. So I got to make sure that I have a black background that I can fade in and out of so that it's a smooth transition. If I'm coming back to someone live, that doesn't matter then, because then we just pop them back on live. But part of my goal with all of these events has been not just the professional look and some production value, but also seamlessness, so that, when you're going from live to pre-recorded, or from pre-recorded to pre-recorded, or from one live thing to another live thing, seamless ways. And part of that is in the design approach, so that there's a consistent look, everything from background, framing, lower third graphics, that also help brand the event and the organization, but also but also then figuring out, some of it is just like, some of it's some video, if it's pre-recorded video, there are things I will do in editing that, just because I know how to edit, I've done a lot of editing. So I sort of know how to kind of play some of those little tricks that make things look, a little bit smoother and whatever. It's kind of drawing on a whole bunch of different skill sets from my video production and as a theater producer, from my days working in sports television and dealing with live what ifs and all of that sort of stuff. So
let's actually put
no
this
single.
Can we put this into a context of what the goals are? Because people, by the way, you've broken the record for attendance. We have 78 people in the room. It's the highest attendance we've ever had. So there are a lot of people in the room who are probably wondering when to do what and what can they do. I mean, Zoom is fine for basic development, for table reads, even for stage readings. Talk about your feeling about that. All three of you. What would you use Zoom for? Just something basic. And Jane will be next.
Yep.
After you.
So obviously, aside from meetings, the thing that I have found Zoom useful for some of these, I really have. I've only listed a few of the events that I've done, but Zoom has been good, obviously for rehearsals, for theater and other things as well. But it's also been very good for some of these organizations. They want to do some sort of special VIP event either before or after the main event. And Zoom breakout rooms offer a certain level of, intermingling among people that you can do, but you can also structure it. So I'll just give one example and then I'll let others speak here.
But Jeremy, if you want to show anything, I can make you a co-host if you want to share a screen for anything.
Yeah, I'm not gonna. There's no way I can share a Zoom breakout that it's already happened.
Okay.
There's some other stuff I can share, but I want to let some other people speak too. But for an event we did in, I guess it was December, for the Irish American Writers and Artists, it was their annual Eugene O'Neill Awards. This year's honoree was Kate Mulgrew. So we had, a whole event that was a combination of live, pre-recorded testimonials, a performance or whatever. The VIP event that preceded it was essentially set up to be a series of Zoom breakout rooms where each room was based on some aspect of Kate's career with people in that room live relevant to that career. So Orange is the New Black, we had Taylor Schilling, we had Dale Sills, we had people like that in the room. So the VIP, the VIP guests, which basically meant they paid more or they were sponsors, got to mingle with those people. In the Star Trek room was Bob Picard and producers from Star Trek and other actors in the show. A literary room because Kate's been writing. So it was, it really worked extremely well for something like that. Another organization we did, sort of designated cocktails, and we had an actress who also bartends, and she did this great little, put on a little show of, how to mix the drinks. And, I found Zoom has been very helpful for that sort of thing in terms of these types of events.
Okay, Jane, you were going to say something. In answer to a question from the room, somebody says, playwrights want to know what the best, cheapest, easiest platform. Zoom is it. Zoom is the best, easiest, cheapest platform, but it's limited in what you can do.
Yeah, I think I'll answer that first, but then what I was going to say, I think Zoom is limited in what it can do because it is a different platform than the stage. So I think the most effective things on Zoom have been things that have been adapted for Zoom or written on Zoom, like the Apple Plays with the Public is something that comes to mind. But just like adapting something, trying to do something audio only, you have to be cognizant of the media that you're performing in. So you can't just take a script that was written for stage and just do it for Zoom if you're trying to reach an audience. You can use it if you're trying to do development. And I think that's the absolutely best use for this. You can invite as many people as you want. You can have, discussions afterwards. It's a very intimate medium. So you can do different things. You can, do this kind of stuff, and you can see a performer's face in a way that you never can on the stage, unless you're sitting in the first row. So again, it has to be written a little bit differently just for that reason. I wanted to answer a question that came up in the chat about interactive theater, and I think one of my graduates, Adam Ray Siegel, is in the crowd here today, and hi Adam. And
Adam, did you mean to come on the screen?
I was right on cue, but I want to let Jane let her say her stuff.
Yeah, and I think he's worked on a piece that's interactive, and it's a mentalism show, and it's the only one that I haven't seen every show that's out there, but it's a mentalism show where everybody who's there is on camera and off mute. So when things are happening, there's an interaction between the performer and some member of the audience. But when someone goes, everyone else goes out. When someone laughs, everybody else laughs. So it was probably the closest thing to being in theater if we define live theater as being in the same space, experiencing the same thing at the same time and reacting together. So I think there's room for that, and then you could do it in a webinar format and 1 million people can watch you, but there's some element of people being in the room. So I commend him for that. But I think the point here is, like, what are we doing in the meantime? Is this stuff theater in terms of plays? I think it's great format for reaching larger numbers of people when you're trying to do events or stay connected or raise money for something. It's not the greatest format for producing a finished produced play, but this is comparable to a reading and more. I think if you do it well, like, it's all about doing it well. If you do, and we're comparing this format to a stage play, and it's not a stage play, it's a different medium. So I wish I wish we'd stop doing that, because it's not that, and we can't have that. So this is what we have, whether it's through StreamYard, whether it's through some of the other fancier things, whether we record. It's a really difficult thing to do live musicals in this format because of the latency, and you can't play the music and sing at the same time, so you have to pre-record stuff. So you lose the live element. But there are places like New York Theater Barn that, you know, if I think it's every other Wednesday, they're presenting new musicals, and they were doing it before the pandemic live, and now they're doing it using StreamYard. I know this personally. We're going to, my show Village of Vale will be on there March 3rd. But it's a development step. You know, they show 2 songs, they interview the team, and it's just a chance to get to know, you know, the people, but also to hear some of the music. It's not, you know, an out-of-town production, but, you know, there are still lots of opportunities to move your play along. You know, one of the things about doing the radio play that was so interesting has been how much the story has developed in the process, because we couldn't rely on the visual. So the writers really got deeper into the story. You might have a 10-part, you know, radio play out of it instead of, you know, a 2-act play. But, you know, I think it's an opportunity for people to get creative and to just, you know, try things. You know, if you're going to throw, you know, stuff against the wall and put it on Zoom, maybe that's for a smaller audience, and develop it. And then as you get more refined in it, you can invite more and more people. You know, if you want to charge, make it better. Like that's our responsibility as producers. If we want people to pay for what we're doing, you know, produce it.
So couple good points that you made. Let me stop
I'll
videos
jump
for
in.
people.
I mean, my company is called the Storyline Project, and really what we're in the business of is telling stories, right? And
Amen.
there's a variety of modes, you know, from any sort of audio storytelling, from the campfire on out to radio to, you know, film, television, now the internet. These are just different tools with which we can use to tell our story. And so you're very right, I think, Jane, about talking about how you adapt to that. And you may find various things about the story that you're telling that you can use as you progress that project on to maybe other different types of channels. And I was going to say that, you know, I also agree that Zoom has been really a good development tool. And yes, it has limitations in terms of presentation. And, you know, if you're really going to be putting something out there to like raise money, you have to be really well put together to be able to do that. It's a really an investor type of presentation. And so even though Zoom is generally accepted all around the world these days, and it's the easiest, you know, thing, you can just go on and do something. If you really are looking to raise money or interest creatives in a project, you really have to be thinking about how you present within your channel.
If I could jump in on that, because, you know, part of this was also talking about limitations, and as you briefly mentioned, you know, musicals are a real challenge in this environment because of the difficulty of having more than one voice in sync at the same time along with the music. There are some platforms out there that I've actually played around with. I was hoping to use one of them for one of these projects, but they're really not where they need to be in order to serve the industry. So, you know, we figure ways around it. For the musicals that I have tech directed and video designed, we did pre-record the music, but that also meant each actor recording their track for each song individually, using a click track, a backing track, and then this massive editing project that basically had to happen in less than a week, because no one is going to be rehearsing these things for weeks on end. You know, they're usually within a 2-week time frame. So, I mean, Bob, if you want, I mean, I can show an example of what we did, you know, what I did in essentially the pre-recorded version, but the thing that we tried to do is we tried to, again, make it as seamless as possible, going from live to pre-recorded and back, so that where the actors are at the end of the book scene or in the book scene that leads up to a song, they begin in the same position in the pre-recorded piece. And then, I do all sorts of things of moving them around, playing around with backgrounds, but then I'll bring them back to whatever position they need to be in the recording to match what's going to immediately follow.
I need to talk to you about this because we're trying to figure out a way to actually bring back our How to Write a Musical That Works musical workshop. And I haven't, I want to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, I've done that now for 2 different shows, and basically a similar approach. It was different direct for each one. So the directors had slightly different things that they wanted to do with it, but it worked.
I'm going to actually, I wanted to define a term because most people know what development is, but I think there might be misunderstandings among a few people. When we talk about development, we talk about Zoom being perfectly well suited for development. We're talking about hearing the play. We're talking about the writer's ability to listen to his play being done with actors, with an audience of a sort. It's not the live audience, and learn things about the play to make the play better. When we're going beyond that, I think we're talking about once a producer is actually involved and is trying to create a product that can be monetized, then we're talking about going a little bit beyond Zoom or finding better ways to use Zoom if that's even possible. And with an editor, I think there are things that can be done. Except Zoom is live. There's nothing you can do as an editor, is there, Jeremy?
Well, you can, and I'm sure, Jeremy, you've had this experience. You can pre-record like an event, and you can use Zoom as the channel for distributing that, to an audience. And I was also noticing that on the chat, there was a question about interactive and online interactive. But, one of the things that I hope to be able to see and do is to have a live performance on stage that also incorporates a video feed that is interactive in a variety of different ways to expand the audience of maybe a small theater into a much broader one.
Just to state what may be obvious to some people, for Zoom, what is interactive is the chat. The only thing that we can approximate with interactive is people actually responding in chat, but that's not really interactive. Okay,
No,
Jones, what?
No, that I mean, not necessarily. I mean, the show that Adam is producing, Reconnected, is an interactive show. It's a mentalism show, and the performer is interacting with his audience, and the audience are the people are interacting with each other the same way that there's 4 of us on this screen right now, and we're talking to each other. He has 20 or whatever. He spotlights the people who are part of the trick, and they talk to each other, and the audience all responds, and because everybody is live, everybody's on video, everybody's on mic. So there is, I mean, you have to be building it for Zoom,
right?
Yeah,
because that's a very specific situation. I understand.
It's a very specific, but I think that's part of what we've been talking about is
exactly.
You have to know what your platform is, so that you build something for that specific platform. The same way that you would, you wouldn't show up, you wouldn't, like film. Let me go back. You wouldn't take a movie and just take the dialogue from the movie and put it on the stage. You have to adapt the movie script for a play. And the same way I've been talking about taking the play that was written and adapting it for radio, you have to adapt it for Zoom or write something for Zoom, knowing the limitations. For example, I find that like farce or split-second timing comedy is very hard when you can't talk over each other in a Zoom format because you cut each other out. So if you're doing that kind of a play, this isn't really the greatest vehicle for it. You don't have a lot of other choices, but just know that it's a harder type of thing to present because timing is so important.
Well, this raises a lot of questions about Adam's success. Adam's had incredible success. He's had 400 performances of this of the show online is done really well. But first of all, can we confirm that you actually are using Zoom?
Is this a direct question for me?
Yeah, Adam. Yeah.
Yes, my show is entirely done in Zoom. We have had a lot of our corporate clients. Some of them have preferred that we use others. For example, when we worked with Google, they obviously can't use Zoom because they have their own competitor, Google Meet. So we did adapt the show for that. We've also adapted it for WebEx and Microsoft Teams. But as Jane was saying, Zoom seems to be the best one for functionality and interactivity. So
And
I would say
how many
99% is Zoom.
How many people in your audience for your piece?
It ranges from about 5 people to 500 plus when we use the webinar option on Zoom as well, which also has different functionality.
I was going to say the webinar is very different from the basic Zoom, so you have to change your show when you go into webinar.
Not the show itself isn't changed, but the tech required for it is different.
Yeah.
We usually suggest standard Zoom call like this for about 50 or less, and then anything above that we transition to a webinar.
Okay. So that clarifies some things that came up for me as a question. I'm trying to see. Okay. Have you had any problems with Zoom bombings?
None. Literally out of 400 shows, we have not had a single problem. I think that was a thing that happened early quarantine. And then I think Zoom increased their security, and also we create custom links as well as webinars and everything since then. So genuinely out of 400 shows, I've never had that happen.
So let's go back to that because that's important. You create custom links. So you don't actually have your link on Facebook say, this is our show, come join us. So people can't find it on Facebook. They can't find it anywhere else. They have to get the link, right?
Exactly. Whether it's our weekly public show that we have right now or our corporate clients, which is about probably 90% of what we do, they're all private links. None of them are listed publicly, and it's all handled directly through me via email.
Well, I know that Kate Camerata still has PTSD from 2 Zoom bombings on Create Theater. I wish she were here so I could find out what she didn't do that she could have done to prevent Zoom bombings. Because I have constantly people are warning me about being Zoom bombed. We have a waiting room, so I see people coming in the waiting room. If I know them, I let them in. If not, I ask who they are. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't do a lot of stuff, but I'm on Zoom. You know, I have at least 3 or 4 Zoom meetings a week that I'm initiating. I've never been. I don't want to say I've never been because now I will be, but you know, that doesn't seem to be a problem.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting. Talking about interactivity and using Zoom as a platform. When I was doing Political Idol, this was a musical, and it was a parody of, of the political games that were going on in October, November. And we had parodyists, satirists, doing imitations of the various political candidates with well-known songs, but different lyrics. And we shot that and put it together as a musical, and everybody was all over the country, in California, here in New York, etc. And they were able to splice everything together again. And they had actually sent out packages, including green screens in the back, props, costumes, etc., for everyone to run. So there was a semblance of a production, concept that was going on here. And then it was done, all put together in the editing room, and then it was promoted primarily on Facebook, but also Instagram and a few like that. And so the people could buy, the thing for, we started at about $20, $20.20 as a matter of fact. And people could buy it and they could see it for so many times and use it that way to be able to promote and actually get some income, from this activity. But because it was a musical, it had to be done first. And then they used Zoom primarily for distribution.
Somebody's asking about YouTube, which will also be YouTube or Vimeo. The easy answer is that that's all recorded stuff. You can put anything out that's been recorded, but what we're talking about right now, to an extent, are things that you're actually having recorded while you're performing them to an audience.
Well, actually, Bob, you can StreamYard broadcast through YouTube or Facebook or any other different platforms. So you can be live. You could be live on YouTube.
I guess what I'm saying is you're not necessarily originate. you can't be live on YouTube, but you can be live in live stream, which is streaming through YouTube. So YouTube, I mean, YouTube and Vimeo can't really be the origin.
Well, I mean, actually,
Can you?
Bob,
Can they?
they actually can, but in most instances, they're not. You can go directly onto YouTube and you can originate a broadcast from within YouTube Live. I haven't had the need to do that. I've done exactly what Jane is referring to, which is many of these streamed events were streamed to Facebook or YouTube or both, or some other social media platform, and then also often embedded into the website of the originating organization. But you can originate, same thing, you can originate from Facebook and you can originate from YouTube. It's just, it doesn't lend itself for doing things like theater necessarily, but you can certainly create your own little, you can go on the air anytime you want.
Okay.
Yep.
I
Bob,
sit
I just wanted
corrected.
I wanted to, RK was talking about, having props and green screens and all that stuff in his particular production where they were charging. Someone wise once told me many years ago when I was doing my first reading in the musical in the True Reading series, to be careful about being too sophisticated in what you're presenting when you're early on in something, because people will think it's finished. In that case, it was a musical, and it was a Greek musical. The composer wanted to have a band with Greek music, Greek instruments, which meant it had to be orchestrated. And Bob said to me, if you do that, number one, we won't pay for it. But number two, if you've gone to the trouble to orchestrate the music, then people are going to think the music is finished, because otherwise, why would you go to the expense? And I thought that was a pretty wise piece of advice. And we just used a piano, and then people can judge it that way. So similarly, the point there is, if you're doing something that's very, very raw, but you want some people to see it, let it be raw. Don't try to dress it up, because then people will think that it's more finished than it actually is. But if you're presenting something that you think that you want people to think is more finished, then figure out how to dress it up. Make sure you're, a friend asked me to join something he was doing. He wrote a movie script. One of the actors was like laying on the floor, leaning up against his bed, that stuff, and it just drove me crazy. Like, so if you want to present, like, there are things that you can do to make things better, and there are things that you can definitely do to make things worse. So, you can have your actors have their script up on the screen, split their screen so they're looking at the camera instead of looking down like this, because there's, especially, you don't want to see people's bald spots. Make sure that people are
Or up their nose. I love looking up their nose.
Yeah. So they're, these are, they sound trivial, but they really impact the way that things are presented. And so, make sure that when people are off the scene, that they shut their video, that when they're back in the scene, they come on the video, and all these things. This is, having a good tech director. And, this was something that got sort of thrown away in the beginning of all this, because the stage manager is so important for stage plays. So is a tech director when you're doing things, virtually. And don't forget about the little details.
The first decision I made when I decided we were going to do a virtual benefit and we're going to produce six short plays, the first decision I made was that every play was going to have a technical advisor, an editor. I think that anybody who is approaching this medium needs to, no matter how much you think you know, you need to bring in a tech person to help you conceptualize it from the beginning, so that your thinking is actually something that actually can be made to happen. We all have great ideas, and sometimes they're not as doable as we think they might be. Or at least you'll have somebody who can tell you the best ways to do what you want to do. We're a little bit
There's
after.
a sense of choreography as well.
Say that again?
With presenting something, there's a sense of a choreography as well. Not that we know about it, from a dance perspective on the theater, but how things are put together and presented on the screen, to make it feel as though it is a single unit, single concept activity.
Based on one of the questions in the chat, I also want to say that the roles that we normally are familiar with in live theater shift a little bit. A lot of things shift when you go from live theater into the medium, this virtual medium. Stage manager. No show can really be without a stage manager. Stage managers are so essential. On Zoom, in virtual, your stage manager also has to have a lot of tech savvy. You can have two people, one be stage manager who's basically organizing and keeping everybody where they're supposed to be. But it also is good if you have somebody who knows the tech as well. Very, very important, guys.
Yeah, I'll second that for the musicals that I did. I mean, I've worked with the same stage manager on both of them. And, you know, we were like invaluable to each other. It was, you know, can't imagine, you know, I mean, I obviously could do it with someone else, but, you know, you kind of feel like, wow, you know, becomes sort of a different version of seamless workflow.
Yeah. So I'm seeing a lot of things pop up in the chat. So let's read through these. A great, oh yeah. Well, if you want some great video editors, you can start with Jeremy, by the way. And you can email me and I can send you other people. We're working with some great people for the True Benefit. The only reason we're not working with Jeremy because Jeremy was doing other stuff. Otherwise, Jeremy I would have grabbed Jeremy right away. Yeah, SMO is tax savvy. Yes. So we're at 6:03. We can take a few questions if you want, or we can go into breakout rooms. But do raise your virtual hands. I think what I'm really most concerned about is, did we talk about the things that you were expecting us to talk about based on how I described this? I mean, I certainly feel like we've talked about limitations, possibilities, and best uses.
I know there was one person who asked a question directly to me, asking if we would be talking about what are the simple, inexpensive solutions. And, you know, obviously we've talked about Zoom. I'll just mention a couple of things quickly just to address that. I mean, you know, there's a zillion different platforms. Some are software, some are browser based. I can't go through all of them. You know, I've been quite happy with StreamYard. It does have its limitations. I can have a separate conversation about that. The basic package, there's a free version, but it's, you know, it doesn't give you everything you need. The paid version.
Can I just say one of the things that you need is it limits the number of people that can be on the screen.
Right. It's not like Zoom. It's, you know, it limits up to, it's 10 people total in the studio at one time, both on screen and backstage. $25 a month, or the Pro plan, which is what I have for $49 a month. There, you know, something like Open Broadcast Studio is free, but there's a much steeper learning curve. And, you know, in order to bring people in live, you need to use some third party like Zoom or Skype or some other form that allows you to bring live elements into it. It's not like Zoom or StreamYard where you just give someone a URL. There's something called Switcher Studio, which is, it's different. It's actually, if you want to do sort of a small scale filming of an in-person production. So in other words, you've got, you know, you actually do have more than one person in the same place. It basically is using iPhones that are all accessing the same Wi-Fi signal, but you're able to switch between cameras. I haven't actually, I mean, I've played around with the tool, but I haven't actually used it functionally yet, so I can't speak to how well it works. But if you have a decent Wi-Fi signal in a specific location, you know, you can do a multi-camera shoot with just using iPhones. And as many people probably know, the video cameras in iPhones are actually quite good, particularly in the most recent models. And there are ways of, you know, hooking it up to your computer so that you can do more things with it and stuff like that.
And just to say it out loud, they're better than the Samsung camera, apparently, which is what I have as a Samsung. And everybody keeps saying, get an iPhone. So, so guys, thanks for this. Again, to the room, virtual handshake. I keep saying that. Virtual hand raise if you want to ask a question, or if we didn't offer any information that you were hoping to get this today. We're here to tell you what you need to know, hopefully. So, so everybody can come into. Well, I see a hand raised. Joel Krantz, yes.
Hi, everybody. I think I might speak for a lot of the writers who are in the crew today. We've been going to a lot of these type of panels about creating virtual shows, and for me, I went out and did it. I got involved pretty early, and I spent months and months doing what Jerry was doing, just editing and editing. So now you get there, and you have this project, and now we're at the big now what. And that's what I thought maybe this panel would be addressing more, what people who are at this level of developing their shows, what we can do. Because my big problem now is finding people to watch it, finding people to watch what I created. How do we do
So
that?
you've asked like several questions.
I'm sorry. The question is, once you have something ready to be seen, how do you get people to watch it?
Let me just say that, Joel, I feel your pain, but I don't think that really has anything to do with the pandemic or non-pandemic. I think that's all about having relationships, about building your team out, about getting to know more and more people who might be,
Right.
interested in what you're doing. If you have something that's, if you have a film that you can actually share, it becomes a little bit easier because you can contact someone that and say, hey, can you watch the first 15 minutes of this link or something like that? And, you can send it. I don't know what arrangements you have about how much you can share, but and it's a lot easier than saying I'm going to spend X thousands of dollars to do a reading that everybody has to come to. But that's not I don't think your issue is a pandemic issue. I think the issue is you have to, it's what we do. That's what producers attempt to do. We have a project they're working on. Well, we contact the people that we think might be interested, please read this script or listen to this music or, come see this reading or that. And it's, that's the, that's the hard part. Having something to show is the easy part. Finding the people to show it to is really the hard part.
Mila, did you have a question?
Hi, Mila here. The show that I'm working on with Cheryl and with Keith, it's about an evening on a TV show. So I imagine somehow that can be worked in to, if it were done as a Zoom, to work out any problems. Is there anything that anybody can think of that would enhance that format regarding doing a show that is a show?
So you're saying basically, how could you use virtual? Doesn't it seem likely that we could use virtual medium to create a show that supposedly is within a TV show? So the answer to that is yes. And the specifics, Jeremy, do you have any ideas?
I don't exactly follow the question. I'm sorry.
So she's doing a show that.
I just want to add that Cheryl has written for TV shows for SVU and shows like that, so she would know what is expected of the screenwriter. So she could parlay that somehow, I imagine, into doing it's about the last night of Nat King Cole's TV show. So that's what it's going to be. With
there are ways that your technical advisor like Jeremy or somebody could actually make it look more like a TV show. But the one thing that you still don't have is you don't have people in the same room, so they're not going to be on the same stage together. They're still going to be in separate frames. But there are also ways in post-production of making those frames look like maybe they are in the same room. There are ways of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some simple stuff like like if I had your true background and so it looked like, and I'm on my screen, I'm on the top right, Bob, you're on the top left, and if we both had that same background, it would almost look like we're in the same room. So there's some things you can do.
Yeah, virtual backgrounds.
Yeah.
Thank
But
you
have to be
so much.
careful.
Thank you.
You have to be careful with virtual backgrounds so that it doesn't look like you're like suspended in midair.
Yeah, unless you actually have, if you're using green screens and you know how to use them and you have proper lighting for that, then it starts to work better. If you're just trying to do like a Zoom version of the virtual screen, it's kind of a recipe for a more distraction for the audience in a lot of instances. But there are other things you can do. I mean, for some of the musicals we had, not precise, everyone got the same physical backdrop, and it was a piece of cloth basically. Now, it still didn't look identical because their lighting was different in each location and their camera was different in each location. But, depending on how you then positioned people, depending on what platform you're using, if you could have them literally side by side so that it seems like they really are, in close proximity, or it becomes sort of that it's a combination of technical and sort of design consideration. And there's no one answer to it, but there are ways of making it closer to what you probably want to do.
Okay, so we've got two more hand
and-
raises.
and
I've got to
two
move on.
quick
I've got to move on.
questions.
I've got to move on, Mila, please.
Okay,
I have
sorry.
to. I have to.
Apologies.
A quick question from Lee. I was actually going to close it after Lee. So Gloria and Joseph, please check your.
I have two very quick questions. One is internet connection fading when you're doing Zoom. I've heard Ethernet works really well. So any advice on that? My second question is, we did a Zoom of the premiere of my play. We got almost 1,000 viewers. What would be a next step with it? It certainly is incomplete in terms of perfection of finish.
Okay, I'm going to make a suggestion. I'm going to make a suggestion that we do a follow-up to this panel with these three people in maybe a couple weeks, and we talk about the next steps because it is 6:15.
Okay, well then, just with the.
Yeah, I would say
better
a next step
internet
would be to apply to the foundations class and learn about producing. And then if you know what the steps are to getting a production up, then you can help yourself move it along. That would be my suggestion.
And the
I think
best.
I think it's a great
Wi-Fi.
suggestion for, hang on here, a great suggestion for all the playwrights in the room, which is the more that you know about the process of what it takes to produce a play, the more you can do to help yourself get a producer or to produce it yourself. And the best way that I know how would be to start with the foundations class. There are, go to all the true panels, and, these Friday sessions every week are talking about a lot of these same things. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, Gloria and Joe, will you be heartbroken if I suggest that we close now?
No, it's totally fine because I'm going to ask Jeremy my question privately anyway, so it's fine.
And Joe, are you okay?
No worries, Joe. No worries, Bob.
Okay, so I want to just thank everybody. I want to thank my panelists. Thank you, Jane. Jane has become like an essential part of True. I don't know what I'd do without her. So is Arcade, and so is Jeremy. Jeremy, I'm not seeing as much as I used to, but he's going to come back. I'm going to get him back. And thank you all for sharing your knowledge and your experiences. I appreciate it. A reminder to the room that we've been doing as much as we can for Pay What You Can, and Pay What You Can has really become a little bit more like pay something. Okay, Pay What You Can, I hope, doesn't always mean zero for everybody, because otherwise we'll have to close eventually. So if you can pay something, and if you want to donate to us, if you had a good time today, if you thought this was valuable, then go to trueonline.org, make a donation. That's all lowercase, make-a-donation. But just go to the website and look for the donation button, which really is on the homepage, I swear.
Or go to truedonate.com.
Oh, I never remember that. There is now trudonate.com, thanks to Joe Nelms.